Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to another of bi-weekly SIG CLI meeting. My name is Maciej. Today is my sixth, and I'll be your host. Our agenda is pretty packed with items, so let's get going right away. A couple announcements. The 1/19th release dates settled down. So the official dates are enhancements freeze is in less than 2 weeks, May 19th, and the code freeze is planned on for June 25th. If you're interested in looking through the dates more carefully, there's a link to the release, to the overall release dates, along with the people that are in charge of the release. I think that's all of the announcements, unless Phil wants to add something.
Nope.
Okay, so with that, I think we can move over. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
No, I didn't have anything.
Okay, so we can move to the main topics, and I see Antoine is the first one on the list. Take it away, Antoine.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Okay, so server-side apply doesn't have a, let me restart. With server-side apply, we don't know if the resource has changed or not when it's being applied, which means that we have a single string of text when somebody applies from kubectl, we say apply or something, which is different from client-side apply, where we have the configured versus unchanged. And we don't know how important this is, and we want to know if we need to do something about it. If we want to have a configured versus unchanged on kubectl, we would have to change something on the API machinery side to report the change. Right now, API machinery doesn't say anything about the change, and we want to know how important this is for the kubectl clients and users. So mostly we're looking for guidance from this group to know what we should be doing.
So I'm just reading the issue now.
Yeah. So yeah, the issue that you're looking at right now is about client-side apply. But yeah, we feel like this shows that some people are interested in knowing if the resource has been applied or not, or if the resource has changed.
Yeah, I've heard this case come up. I've had people come and say that they parse the output using a regular expression or something to figure out whether or not resources have been applied.
Yeah, from the API machinery perspective, we believe that's wrong and people shouldn't be doing that. But I mean, users have their own reasons, right? We've had one person create a ticket saying that they would want to see some sort of status, HTTP status code returned by the API server to know if the resource has changed or not. So we have, yeah, at least we have suspicions that people would want this feature, but we don't see why they would want to use this feature. So we don't know if we need to change the API server to report some kind of status.
Yeah, I think people are going to want this. Even just from a human perspective, the visibility into like, did something change is like in the logs is going to be helpful at some point when you're trying to track down an issue and see what happened. It may be a resource change that you didn't expect to, or a resource you expected to change didn't. Like all that stuff is useful.
Yeah, I understand that.
So the API server has the information, right?
Not so much. I mean, we do because we know if the resource version has changed. For a client, they don't have the prior resource version, so they can't know. But the API server knows about the resource version after and before. So
can't you just reflect the information whether something was changed or not in the status?
wait, can you say it again?
After you apply a resource, you're getting back the actual resource,
Yes.
or you're getting the status? Oh, the resource.
You're getting the resource, but with server-side apply, you don't need to get the resource before. So you don't know what the resource version is before you apply.
Yeah, so like an HTTP status code or like a response header or something like these, right, are like ways we could do it outside the resource. Is that kind of what you were saying, Antoine?
That's what we have in mind, yes, but that's a change in API machinery. We need to agree on that. It's not something we've done before. I see how it would have value even for client-side apply. In this bug specifically, we have situations where we send a patch and the patch does nothing. So we show as configured because we sent a patch, even if the patch does nothing. And people are like,
Right.
It shows configured, but it did nothing. If we did add this header, we could return the information for all types of patch and updates. So we could actually fix that bug at the same time. But the question is, do we want to go through the process of like changing the API server for that?
And by changing, it's like an addition, right? So it's like not, we're not talking
quite,
about,
because you would be changing assuming we would go with HTTP return codes. So instead of getting 200, you'll be getting 200 and something.
Nah, we can do that. I don't think we can do that. First of all, there is no good status code for that. And second of all, I don't think we want to change the status code at this point. So we would probably go with a header.
yeah, then like it's backwards compatible. You're not going to have any, like even if someone's reading all of the data that's there and doing stuff with it, the header is just more data.
Yes. But also from the API machinery, we don't want people to use these to trigger specific behavior because we think it's wrong. It's an anti-pattern for the declarative world. And it's not something we've done in the past, so we have to think about the consequences of doing that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the saying like that you're gonna like effectively the argument there is that you're gonna obfuscate what you're doing because you don't want people to do stuff with the knowledge of what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say obfuscate because it's not on purpose, but yeah, yes.
Well, if you're making an explicit decision not to do it, then like it's effectively the same thing, right? It was an accident and now it's a decision. Yeah, I guess another thing is like whether it's correct or not all the time, like whether or not resources were updated is returned today. Like I think kubectl exits one if it thinks it tried to update stuff, or kubectl apply, I believe, exits non-zero.
I don't think so.
Really?
No, the exit codes are not there. That was discussed last time during the bug scrub that we would love to have exit codes, but we do. I remember that in several of the commands, and Pudge included, not sure about apply, we have a condition which verifies whether the patch that we're sending over to the server is empty. If it's empty, then we are saying that nothing has changed. And if it's actually that, and if we're actually sending something over to the server, we are saying that the resource has changed. So not having that information is definitely something at the level of a breaking change for kubectl users.
Yeah. Okay, it sounds like you want this feature then.
Yeah, I think it's a valuable information to have, because
Okay.
it's not coming from me personally, but I've been addressing several issues where people were interested in knowing whether the command actually applied any kind of changes to the command, or it was a no-op.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Antoine? Okay, hearing none. Alex, you're next. Composition, support, and customize.
Hi, everyone.
So sorry, I'm trying to document the decision, and the decision was we do want a header if there's been a change on the server-side apply. Sorry to interrupt.
I don't know if the decision is we need a header, but I think the decision is we need to have a way to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just write down that, yes, we want to have some way of indicating that the change was performed on the server. The actual implementation will probably figure it out in the API machinery SIG.
Sounds good to me.
Sorry, Alex, you can take it away from here.
No problem. Hi, everyone. As we said in the previous meeting, the way to go forward for this issue was to send a documentation example where we can showcase how one would use composition in Customize. I've done so about a day ago. So if anyone has comments on that, we can discuss a bit now, I guess. Or if Jeff or Philip have any comment on this issue. I don't know if you've seen anything more on that.
Yeah, I gave it a read. So the summary for those who haven't read it is that, and this is from the issue discussed during the last meeting, but I think it does a really good job of capturing kind of the desired interface that was discussed over the course of the meeting. And effectively, what it is the customized files themselves can have a lot of configuration in them, right? And so you can have config map generator and a customized file and a list of particular patches and maybe certain annotations you want to apply, right? And so there may be like a customized file that's 100 lines, right? And that customized file may be scoped to configure a particular resource to use like reCAPTCHA, right? Or LDAP or something, right? And so conceptually you're capturing a collection of configuration customizations that are for one like logical feature, one logical component or something like that, right? And so now if you have a customized file that says, okay, here are the various patches and whatnot required to either do LDAP or use a live database or use an in-memory database or whatever it is, and that may mean multiple patches or multiple annotations or multiple types of things, then now you want to build a system that's composed of maybe a couple of these things, right? So mix in the set of patches and config map and secret generators for a live database, right? Or mix in the set for a in-memory database, which may be a different ones. And so the ask here is to effectively be able to define a customization file that gets composed with, can be composed in at kind of the higher layer in the graph, right? And so instead of limited to pure inheritance of customization files, this enables creating a single customization file, which is composed of maybe 3 or 4 other customization files, and then those patches apply to a set of resources. The API looks relatively small, or I should say it's not relatively simple, right? It's effectively adding the ability of some components. I think the kind was the main change here.
Right.
And so I think there's certainly a discussion to be had of is the right way of expressing a component through kind and keep it in resources, or is it better to make it a customization and then have it be in a separate field, or a combination of the two, both a separate field and a separate kind, right? Like all that sort of stuff. What should the kind's name be? Is it patch or is it component? I think all that stuff is stuff we'd want to dig in before, certainly before merging any PR or accepting any feature, but it probably should be deferred until after conceptually the mechanics of the thing are agreed upon, and that this is a feature that we want. I think what's written here makes sense to me conceptually, though. Jeff's on the call, so I think he could also chime in. If Jeff, have you gotten a chance to look at it yet?
I can chime in. Hey, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to write out a detailed example and a proposal. So no, I have not had the time to go through this thing before this meeting, but I'm going to go through it this week. The long issue that spawned there's been a couple of issues that were titled something along the lines of support composition and customize. And I've engaged on those threads and tried to boil things down to what is the problem you're trying to solve. And then I would pose the question, can I solve that problem with the existing framework? And this is just generally a good technique to use in anything. Like if you're talking about add an extension to C++, you know, and somebody has a new special case that they want to solve, you know, before you introduce multiple inheritance or whatever it is to C++, you might ask yourself, well, do I want to, I need to recognize the trade-off, this balance between ease of expressing a particular use case and keeping the overall model simple, easy to understand, and importantly, testable, right? So on that thread, support composition and customize, we were able to provide transformers and overlay structures that solved a lot of the initial issues anyway in the thread. I think I dropped off of it a couple of months ago, so there may be some new ones there. So my first attempt would be to boil down the use case, see if we can do it in the existing framework, and get a handle on how ugly that is or whether or not it's impossible. If it is indeed truly ugly and everybody agrees it's really hard and that the use case is something we want to support, and when I say support, I mean it really represents a best practice that Kubernetes should adopt and encourage under our notions of configuration is data and so on and so forth, then great, then let's do it. Oh, sorry. Thank you for the tip. Appreciate that. Yeah, COVID, these are the cheap headphones. I gotta spring for some good headphones and good microphones and stuff. Anyway.
Just sandbagging for someone to send them a pair of bows, by the way, in case anyone didn't pick
Yeah, I got like this thing. I don't know if you can see this thing, but my USB port, I only have one USB port on this ancient laptop I'm using, and that's going to my mouse because I like mice. Okay, so I just rambled a long time, but my general approach has been try to fix it using what we have and then prove that it's awful and can't work, and then we do the new thing. So I look forward to reading through this thing and trying to reproduce the use case and see if I can solve it that way. And if I can't, then we ask ourselves if does this mean we should do something big? And does that sound fair?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I just add one caveat to that.
Yes.
The can we do it with the framework we have? I think obviously means like is it painful to do with the framework we have?
Right.
Not is it possible?
Right. So if it turns out it's possible, but it's horrible, right? Then that's exactly what I want to look for. I want to look for a demonstration that. So there's two things: is it horrible, right? And also, is this is the problem we're trying to solve an example of a best practice we want people to we think is good, that we believe in.
In fact, Jeff, thinking about what you just said, I'd probably say that if it's possible to do with the framework and painful, that's probably the ideal case we're looking for, because it means, yes, it's in scope. It's not something that's just like totally out of scope, like it can't be done with the framework, like some random thing. It can be done with the framework, but the mechanics of doing so could be improved, right? So that's
right. Right.
If I may say something on this, in general, I agree with your way of viewing things, Jeff. I think specifically in this case, I think there's a deeper reason why there are many people that have bumped into this issue, and I'm not sure if it has to do with composition per se, but more with the fact that they at some point, maybe it's not different features, maybe it's just a very simple patch. At some point, they try to use two overlays to edit the same base. And that is what Customize does not let you do, because it will fail. And I think a lot of people expect that this simple thing will not fail, and that it will work. And that's how they reach to this issue, because we have the error that most people will encounter. So that's the one thing. But sorry, do you want to say something?
Well, I mean, it again would boil down to a specific case, because there's many examples of multiple overlays that modify the same base in our high-level unit tests, high-level feature tests, and examples. So it is a special. I mean, it is a particular case. I'm sure there's a particular case where you have trouble. So that's what I want to dig into.
Okay. And yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the path forward is clear. Let's go ahead and make a attempt to build it, satisfy that use case that you have, and see what the answer looks like. And if it's really ugly, then maybe we need to introduce the customization patch. I mean, it sounds plausible. It sounds like a good idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It sounds like a good idea. I just want to erect a barrier to adding new features to the language, if you will. Right?
Yeah, that's
just a sanity. Yeah, to keep it simple.
Yeah. And on that side of things, of keeping it simple, I think there's another thing that currently I'm not sure. Jeff, maybe you've seen this more. I'm not sure if a lot of people use this feature of Customize, where if you point to the same base from different overlays, but you use a different name prefix or suffix or namespace, that you want to, with one command, deploy 2 different or 3 different applications. I'm not sure if it's that much used. I'm not sure if it's even in the examples of Customize, to be frank.
Right, right. Maybe not. So we can see if we can add an example and see how hard it is.
That's what you want to do, though, right, Alex? That is what you're the use case that you're targeting.
No, it's the opposite. The thing that I believe is not common is that thing in Customize where 2 overlays, different overlays, point to the same base, but use a different name prefix, and thus deploy 2 different applications. In our case, it's one application that has been edited by 2 different stuff, not 2 completely different, not not two applications with different names. No. Not the same application with two different names. I'm not sure how I can explain that better.
Okay, and so then what was the question regarding the using two different applications from the same base, or two instances of an application from the same base? Was there something you wanted to talk about there?
Yeah, the point was that, let's say that your base is Nginx, okay? And you have two overlays that are the name prefix dev and the name prefix staging. That's the first overlay and the second overlay. And you combine those two overlays. That's a feature that Customize allows. And once you do Customize build on the overlay that combines those two overlays, you will get two Nginx applications, two Nginx deployments, one with dev dash Nginx and the other with staging dash Nginx. And my question is that I'm not sure if anyone uses this feature at all, because now we hit a limitation for a feature that I think it's not used.
Yeah, I don't. It'd be great to have more usage statistics. I think Jeff is actually working on, or has been for some time developing a project which will get data from GitHub on different instances of people using Customize. So maybe that we could use that data to figure some of this stuff out. It might be hard to figure out how, like, people are using Customize, like in aggregate, like 10,000 instances, like which ones use a diamond, right? Like we might be able to calculate that. But anyway, it sounds like that's not actually blocking solving this problem though, right?
No. It's the reason we hit this issue, but under that, it doesn't block us.
Cool. All right. So the next steps, I think, yeah, Jeff obviously will review. That's in the action items. I think it probably makes sense after that if Jeff agrees that the problem is not well addressed today and that the proposed API is conceptually correct, right, without going into the details of how it's represented specifically, then the next step would be to, I think, post that back to the issue, because there's a bunch of people on the issue and a bunch of conversation, and just close the loop there and say, this is the planned fix for the problem in this issue, right? And then at that point in time, dig into the fine details. I think,
yeah, so sorry to interrupt, but concretely, so chime in, try to provide an actual example in the existing, try to solve the problem statement in the existing framework, and see if that's A, possible, and B, how ugly it looks. And then that would be it. Then the next step would be everybody decides what to do. I don't really want to decide anything. I want to first provide an example of what the alternative is in our existing framework before we expand it.
My understanding, Alex, is that the way that you would solve this in the existing framework is to copy and paste parts of customization files around. And so you'd have, you'd have customized files that were like, the way you do manual composition, right, is instead of referencing a customized file that's shared and composed into 3 different other customized files, you just copy and paste the contents of that file into 3 different places. Is that correct?
That's roughly how things go. You can get smarter a bit, but that's how it ends up, yeah.
Okay, so maybe add
Got
to
it.
the end of the document a summary that says, a quick note saying that the way that you would currently do this with the framework is to copy and paste this file here, here, and here, or the contents of this file into these locations, right? Something like that.
Yeah, that would be super helpful.
And then it's there for posterity and people know. You could do it like if this was a blog post. So I love the way you wrote it, and like it's a great as user documentation, and maybe along the same theme of how writing proposals in the form of the sort of documents our end users will eventually consume. Like a blog post, if this was written as a blog post, it would say like, before you'd have to do such and such, right? Now we have introduced this new feature that provides this, right?
I'm going to chime in on complimenting you on this fine example here. It's really, really nice, well written, and it's the kind of thing that can instantly become documentation, which is fantastic.
Thanks, guys. Philip, what you said was that you would like to see in this example what the user will have to do in the current situation. You mean the copy pasting of stuff, right?
Yeah,
right.
And I don't think you need to go like deep into it, right? Like you put a lot of effort into this already and it looks great, but just making it clear so everyone knows, like maybe a paragraph that, with a couple of bullet points and say you'd copy like, or a table that says where things are copy and pasted or something like that, or do the full examples, whatever it is. But yes, if
yeah, let's do
write
it.
something at the either end or the top. Great, thank you, Alex.
Thanks.
Right, and then I think there's an action item that is after, like, eventually post back to the, oh no, there it is, I see it.
Yeah, I put it right next
Perfect.
to, but maybe, yeah, we can split the Jeff's second part as a separate action item. Okay, cool.
And then Alex, this doesn't need to go in the notes, but Alex, it's worth noting that like the infrastructure Kustomize built on is going through like a rewrite, and it's quite far along. So we just want to make sure that if we were to implement this proposal, that it would be implemented in the new style so that we don't have to migrate that as well. And so we can follow up out of band about what that looks like.
Okay, cool. Just a reminder, the PR we're talking about is about 30 lines or so. So it should be easy to see if it fits to the next iteration of Kustomize. That should be pretty easy to see.
Perfect. Love hearing that.
50 lines, yay.
Can you get it down to 45?
My best. But it's not mine. It's
delete some comments or tests.
yeah.
Just kidding. Being facetious here.
I have a general question with regards to this. At least from my loose understanding of the differences of your proposal versus to what's currently proposed, isn't the difference a matter of how much actual customization you will have per deployment flavor? Meaning if there's only one thing you're changing in between the different deployment flavors, then obviously the composition would be in favor. But if more than 50% of the customized file is different in each case, I'm not sure if composition will help you with this, and then the old approach will be better. Or am I missing something?
I think the point is, let's say that you want to enable a feature for an application, and it has some options. You don't want to, once these options change, you don't want to grep and set your way around this issue across overlays. You want to change this only in one location. it's handling the yeah, it's drying the overlays and moving things to just one location.
Yeah, I can imagine like if you have, I mean, it's like, do you copy and paste code or create a function that, you know, has the shared code is kind of my, I guess, the metaphor analogy, right? And it's like, well, it depends. But certainly, like in the case provided in the example, like if the reCAPTCHA, for instance, variant required a new patch or something like that, right? If there were 3 variants that used the reCAPTCHA that required reCAPTCHA to be enabled for them, you would not, it would be better just to update the one custom reCAPTCHA customized than all 3 copies of it, right? Or something like that is my guess. Alex, is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, sure. That's fair.
Okay. Yeah, that's literally what I was thinking. It's, as usual, it's a matter of choice and giving the choice to users. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions with regards to this topic? Okay, hearing none. Let's move over to Ahmed and the rewrite of kubectx.
Hey folks. You know, kubectx is a project that is not in the SIG, but recently I did some work on porting kubectx to Go. So I'm gonna give a very brief demo, if I can share my screen. Ajay.
Sure. Let me add you as co-host and stop sharing.
All right.
Okay, you should now be able.
All right, that's good now. So yeah, as you may know, kubectx is this project that is semi-popular because switching between clusters and namespaces is actually something that people do pretty frequently, but in kubectl, despite it's possible, it's kind of lengthy to write that command to actually switch between namespaces and contexts. So up until this point, this project was actually written purely in Bash. It had a pretty good success. Although it was actually kind of slow because we were shelling out to kubectl under the covers, and we were doing multiple calls, and then which in turn read the kubeconfig file, as you know. So what I did was I basically thought about writing this in Go for a while, and I finally did it. And the current version is, as expected, it's a bit faster. So if I actually, you know, if I were to show you how this project works, it's basically a program that you run, and you can switch, you know, back and forth between contexts, or you can have Bash completion. It's not available here, but normally on Bash, you know, you can choose between contexts, etc. As a, you know, what I actually wanted to share is something that we do in this version, which is we actually do now have the capability to edit the YAML files directly without losing their format or contents. So we totally respect the user in terms of what they do. So if I, for example, if I come here and if I actually like write an example comment here, if I exit and like switch the context again, and if I look at it again, you'll see that the comment is still there. And the way this works is under the covers, there's this Go YAML library that you might know from Gustavo Niemeyer. And this library has a new version that is not the default. It is the V3 version. And this V3 version actually, if I can find the API documentation, this new version exposes a type that lets you directly deal with YAML without unmarshalling it to the final struct. So there's this thing called node, and you know, you can actually control each field and what content does it have, what sort of string it is, what sort of, you know, multi-line string it is, and you can control them. You can, you know, set the position of the fields. You can preserve the ordering and comments. So I believe, does Customize actually use this, by the way? I was going to ask.
Yeah, this is currently what we're rebasing on. We actually wrote a bunch of wrappers around this to make it's not always the simplest thing to use this particular API. So we wrote a number of wrappers around it.
That's actually really good to know, because I was about to say that I found this to be really hard to use as well. So I would like to probably go use the customized wrappers that you have. That's good to learn.
Cool. Yeah, I can tell you a bit about this, but why don't you? Did you want to continue presenting, or is that it?
No, that's pretty much what I wanted to share, actually.
Okay. Yeah. So that's great. That's awesome. It's so great to see you doing this, because we are headed exactly the same direction, right? In terms of structure and comments and all this stuff is actually important. Sorry about that. Hold on.
It's okay, Phil.
So,
Jeff,
yeah,
do you want to take over? I'm gonna.
Yeah, I can chat on this. So the underlying mechanics of manipulating YAML, as you know, YAML is a kind of a bizarre wrapper around JSON and has all these funky things that people maybe use, maybe don't use, like back references and whatnot. So getting a good underlying library that allows us to, manage field order and retain comment structures as we, shove that YAML through some kind of transformation and get new YAML out the other side is, the reason why we're rewriting the rebasing customize on a much more powerful YAML library. So yeah, it's going to be handy for any sorts of application like this, where you want to mess with YAML, maintain comments. Yes.
Yeah, I was just looking at the Go doc, and it seems pretty good. Yeah, that's kind of what I needed. Well, I'm glad I shared that. Thank you.
I mean, my only problem is that unfortunately kubectl is not using that one, which basically means even though you will preserve the comments and everything else, the moment kubectl touches this file and it touches, well, it will touch it eventually upon modifying, because I'm hoping it does not ruin this when reading. It will get changed. Like ideally, we would switch kubectl to also use the third version of the library, but I doubt this will happen until.
So I would say that there are other things that touch kubeconfig files, like the gcloud command line tool. I think other cloud providers have similar tools. I think all of them are probably going to destroy that file. Yeah. Although I'm hearing in the community that there are a lot of handcrafted files that operations people get from their admins or something like that. So for those files, if they use kubectx directly and if they use kubecontrol in read-only mode, then that file format will be preserved. So I think that's pretty much what they need anyway.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, ideally in the upcoming ones, we will be able to switch to YAML 3 as well in kubectl, which would solve the problems for hopefully the majority of users. But that's a long-term goal, I guess.
I'll add one thing if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's awesome seeing other folks discover these libraries, and in addition to just low-level libraries for manipulating individual YAML files, we've also been developing pipelines and infrastructure for manipulating collections of YAML files and merging in OpenAPI to provide context, so that you can read in, for instance, a directory and then apply a change to each node, each resource, and then you can, as you traverse an individual resource, if you're at a field like spec.replicas or something, you should be able to get the OpenAPI for that field. And so if you're developing plugins that are more sophisticated than reading and writing a single YAML file, for instance, you may want to look at some of the other libraries we're building to make manipulation of configuration easier generally.
Yeah, I saw the demo for CGAPs for CAPT actually. I think my use case is a little bit different in this case. My main problem is like how kube control actually reads from multiple kube config files and which one does it choose, which one to write to. That's something that I'll be looking at next, because that part is like a little bit undefined in terms of behavior, like what's going to happen if you have multiple kube config files stitched together in an environment variable that, you know, you set the context, which one are you supposed to actually set, and vice versa. So thanks for the suggestion though.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, there's some lengthy function somewhere in the client Go, most probably, which kubeconfig is being picked because there are 3 or 4 possible places that we're looking for. And if I remember correctly, there's a hierarchy, but that hierarchy is not documented. Maybe once you figure it out of reading that code, I honestly don't know even where exactly that code lives, but it's a matter of grabbing through the source code. Maybe opening
Actually found it, I think.
docs.
Yeah.
Maybe opening a docs PR would be pretty cool as well. Thanks.
Sounds good.
Does anyone have any questions for Ahmed?
When does this get updated on Crew?
Hopefully soon. I don't think it's stable yet.
Any other questions? Okay. So I guess the demo for custom plugin indexes is for the next time, if I understood correctly. So we can move over to the stand-ups, and Crew is the only one so far.
Yeah. So as we talked about in previous meetings, that we're actually trying to allow Crew to install plugins from custom indexes that are not centralized. So we're going to have a demo next time. So the lead developer on that is Chris Kim, who's on the call right now. Hopefully Chris is going to give a demo in 2 weeks. And lastly, we raised an issue to the Code of Conduct Committee. Just wanted to let the people here know there has been a GitHub comment that wasn't respectful. So I'll just leave it there.
Okay, does anyone else have any other stand-ups that they want to present to the group? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much for your time, and have a wonderful day. Time and stay safe. Bye all.
Thanks, Machi.